I stared at the email notification that had just popped up on my laptop screen. It was from a publishing company, one of the most prestigious in the literary world. My heart quickened as I read the subject line, "An opportunity for azurite." The words danced before my sapphire eyes, and for a moment I dared to hope. Caleb Publishing. The name sent shivers down my spine. Caleb, the owner of the company, was not just a formidable figure in the world of literature. He was also my favorite author. His words had been my solace during the countless solitary nights of my secluded existence. With trembling fingers, I clicked on the email. The words unfolded before me, revealing an invitation to meet Caleb himself at his own home. My breath caught in my throat. This was an opportunity beyond my wildest dreams, a chance to step out of the shadows and into the light. But my heart, though hopeful, was also heavy with the weight of my past. I had been found abandoned in a cave as a baby, my only possession a necklace with my name etched onto an azurite stone. It was this stone that had inspired my pen name, Azurite, and it was a constant reminder of the mysteries that shrouded my origins. I had lived in seclusion for so long, hiding the truth of my agelessness. I had stopped aging at 21, frozen in eternal youth while the world around me continued to change. It had been a blessing and a curse, a secret I had guarded fiercely. And now fate had offered me a chance to reveal myself to the world, to meet the man whose words had been my refuge. But fate, it seemed, had other plans for me. I decided to get ready immediately. The anticipation hung heavy in the air as I stood before the mirror, my reflection framed by cascading, midnight black hair. My sapphire eyes shimmered with a mix of excitement and apprehension. The email from Caleb Publishing had thrown my carefully curated world into disarray. I glanced at the elegant dress hanging on the closet door, the deep azure fabric echoing the color of the stone that had defined my identity for so long. As I carefully donned the dress, its silky texture seemed to whisper secrets only it knew, secrets about my past, my purpose, and my connection to the elusive dragonstone. It had been a symbol of my existence, but tonight it felt like a mantle I was preparing to cast off. My car, an aging relic of mechanical engineering, awaited me in the driveway, its headlights dim in the fading twilight. I grasped the handle and slid into the driver's seat, my fingers caressing the steering wheel, a faithful companion on countless solitary journeys. It purred to life with a reassuring rumble as I turned the key, but the engine's purr quickly soured into a disgruntled growl. The dashboard lit up like a celestial tapestry of warning signs, and I cursed under my breath. My car had chosen this moment to betray me, its engine sputtering and wheezing as if it were challenging my resolve. Panic surged, threatening to claw its way to the surface, but I took a deep breath, summoning the determination that had carried me through years of seclusion. With trembling hands, I tried the ignition again, praying to the gods of mechanical misfortune for a miracle. But the gods remained silent, and my car steadfastly refused to cooperate. Frustration surged, but I couldn't let it consume me. Not tonight. I killed the engine, my resolve hardening like the azurite stone around my neck. I would not let this setback keep me from seizing this opportunity. With a sigh, I locked the car and set off on foot, the echoes of my footsteps mingling with the racing beat. As I walked briskly along the dimly lit street, the evening air turned cool against my skin, and my mind raced with thoughts of the impending meeting with Caleb. The city's bustling nightlife cast a kaleidoscope of neon lights and distant chatter, a stark contrast to my secluded world. A neon-lit taxi appeared on the horizon, its yellow exterior a beacon of hope. I raised my hand, and the cab pulled over. As I settled into the back seat, I gave the driver the address of Caleb's house, a location I had only seen on a digital map until now. The journey was a whirlwind of city lights and passing shadows. I watched as the familiar cityscape transformed into an exclusive neighborhood. The taxi rolled to a stop before a pair of grand wrought iron gates adorned with intricate designs. The driver announced my arrival, and I paid him before stepping out. Standing before Caleb's impressive villa, I marveled at its sheer opulence. The moonlight bathed the facade in a silver glow, and the house seemed to rise like a majestic castle from a storybook. The architecture spoke of a time gone by, a time of elegance and grandeur that resonated with my own love for timeless tales. Taking a deep breath, I approached the heavy wooden door, each step echoing in the silence of the night. My heart fluttered with excitement and trepidation. When I reached the door, I raised my hand and pressed the doorbell. The sound chimed through the house, a melodic note that seemed to hang in the air. Moments later, the door swung open, revealing an impeccably dressed butler. His expression remained stoic as he greeted me, and I could sense a hint of curiosity in his eyes. With a steady voice, I announced myself. "I'm Millie Chasm, here to meet Mr. Caleb." The butler nodded, his demeanor unchanged, and he ushered me inside with a courteous gesture. As I stepped across the threshold, I couldn't help but be struck by the grandeur of Caleb's home. The marble floors gleamed under crystal chandeliers, and the walls were adorned with priceless works of art. As the butler led me deeper into Caleb's opulent villa, my heart continued its erratic dance of anticipation. It was a moment I had longed for, a chance to meet the enigmatic author who had held my imagination captive for so many years. Little did I know that this encounter would defy all expectations. We entered a lavishly adorned study, where a figure stood silhouetted against the warm glow of a fireplace. Caleb, the man himself, turned to face me, and time seemed to slow. His eyes, pools of dark wisdom, met mine, and in that instant I felt an inexplicable connection, an ancient bond that stretched beyond the boundaries of mere coincidence. Recognition flickered in his gaze, and a knowing smile curved his lips, as though he held the key to secrets long buried within my soul. I hadn't shared my real name, yet here was Caleb, acknowledging me as Millie Chasm. How could he know? But before I could voice my astonishment, a strange sensation coursed through me as his hand reached out, his fingers lightly grazing my cheek. It was an innocent touch, but it ignited something electric, a spark that surged through my body like lightning. In that fleeting moment, a vivid image flashed through my mind. A cave, darkness, and a warm, comforting presence cradling me as a baby. It was a memory I had never known I possessed, a fragment of my past, now brought to life. Confusion and intrigue swirled within me as Caleb withdrew his hand, his smile deepening, as though he too had glimpsed something profound. The room seemed to hold its breath, a suspended moment in time before reality rushed back in. What was happening? The opulent surroundings of Caleb's study seemed to close in around me as I stood before this enigmatic man. His presence was both captivating and disconcerting, like a riddle I couldn't solve. His gaze bore into mine with a searching intensity that sent shivers down my spine. Caleb's voice, smooth and commanding, broke the silence. "Millie Chasm, it's been a long time." I blinked in confusion, my mind racing to catch up with his words. "I'm sorry, but I don't believe we've met before," I replied cautiously, my voice quivering slightly. A flicker of hurt crossed his face, a shadow of vulnerability beneath the surface of his cool exterior. "You don't remember, do you?" I tried to search my memory, but it was as if a thick fog had descended over my past. Nothing about this man felt familiar, and yet there was something about him that tugged at the edges of my consciousness. I really can't say," I stammered, feeling a knot of unease tightening in my chest. Caleb's attractive appearance added to the enigma. His dark hair framed a face that seemed both ageless and timeless, and his eyes held the wisdom of ages. There was a magnetic quality about him that drew me in, a sense of mystery that beckoned me closer, even as it sent warning signals to the depths of my instincts. His next words were a low whisper that seemed to reverberate in the room. "We have a connection, Millie, one that goes beyond the ordinary. You can't deny it." I took an involuntary step back, my heart pounding in my chest. "I don't know what you're talking about." Caleb's movements were sudden and unpredictable. He closed the distance between us in an instant, his hand coming to rest on my arm with a grip that was both firm and strangely gentle. "Remember," he urged, his voice laced with urgency. His intense gaze bore into mine, and for a moment, I felt as though he was peering into the very depths of my soul. Images flickered at the edges of my consciousness, fragments of a memory just out of reach. It was as if a door had cracked open, but I couldn't quite step through it. Fear mingled with fascination as I met his gaze, and I couldn't deny the pull he had on me. There was something about Caleb, something ancient and powerful, that I couldn't resist. But it also frightened me, this inexplicable connection that defied reason. As Caleb's grip on my arm tightened, I was torn between the desire to know more and the instinct to pull away from the unknown. The enigma of our encounter deepened, leaving me standing on the precipice of a mystery that held the key to secrets I couldn't yet fathom. Panic gripped my chest, a wild and primal instinct that sent adrenaline coursing through my veins. Caleb's words had grown increasingly bizarre, and his grip on my arm had become too much to bear. I had to escape this bewildering situation. With a swift, desperate motion, I attempted to wrench myself free from his grasp, but Caleb was faster and stronger than I could have ever imagined. His hand tightened, and his voice turned desperate. "Please, Millie, listen to me. I am a dragon." My heart pounded in my chest as I pulled away, disbelief etched across my face. "Excuse me?" My astonishment surged, and I stared at him in disbelief. It was a claim so outrageous, so utterly beyond the realm of reason, that I began to wonder if Caleb had lost his sanity. The room seemed to close in on me, and I took a step back, my eyes wide with disbelief. "A dragon?" I stammered, unable to conceal the incredulity in my voice. "That's impossible." But Caleb's gaze remained unwavering, his eyes burning with a fervent intensity that sent shivers down my spine. His grip on my arm tightened as if to anchor his unbelievable claim in reality. "Believe me, Millie," he implored, his voice tinged with desperation. "It's the truth." My mind raced, grappling with the impossible notion that the man before me could be anything other than human. I just couldn't accept it. I ran out of his office without warning and didn't stop even as he yelled my name. Who would have thought that I'd ever run away from the only man I've ever admired? The butler tried to stop me at the door, but thankfully I was more agile than him, and I managed to dash out of the door and out of the big iron gates. But before I could make my escape, a sudden commotion erupted around me. A group of men, seemingly materializing out of thin air, surrounded me. They were dressed in dark, nondescript clothing, their faces hidden behind masks that concealed their identities. One of them stepped forward, his voice low and menacing. "We want the precious stone." Caleb was only a few steps behind me as he hadn't given up and was still chasing me. I glanced at him, bewildered and alarmed, but he moved with a speed and grace that seemed otherworldly. With a swift and fluid motion, he positioned himself between me and the menacing strangers, his eyes blazing with a fierce determination. "You won't have it," he declared, his voice echoing with authority. As Caleb and the men exchanged tense words, I seized the opportunity to make my escape again. My heart pounded in my chest as I dashed toward the exit, determined to climb into a taxi and put this surreal nightmare behind me. But just as I was almost within reach of the main road, a strong hand closed around my wrist, yanking me back with brutal force. I cried out in shock, my vision spinning as I collided with a solid presence. Pain flared at the back of my head, and darkness closed in around me. The world slipped away as I succumbed to unconsciousness, leaving me with unanswered questions and a sense of impending danger that clung to my fading awareness. My head throbbed as consciousness clawed its way back to me, like a dim light struggling to pierce the shadows of a nightmare. The air was heavy with the metallic scent of blood, and my vision swam in and out of focus. Panic surged when I realized I was strapped to a cold, unforgiving table. My hands and feet were bound, and every movement sent sharp waves of pain coursing through my body. Disoriented and disheveled, I tried to take in my surroundings. The room was dimly lit, its walls draped in a cold, sterile atmosphere that seemed to amplify the sense of dread knotting in my stomach. Two men loomed over me, their faces masked by malevolence. The first, a mechanic with grimy hands and a twisted grin, held a set of sharp, gleaming instruments that gleamed ominously in the dim light. The other, an unknown man with cold, calculating eyes, seemed to revel in my helplessness. "Welcome back to the land of the living," the mechanic sneered, his voice dripping with malice. I fought against the restraints, my voice trembling as I cried out, "Who are you? What do you want?" The unknown man leaned closer, his expression devoid of compassion. "We need something from you, sweetheart, and we're going to get it one way or another." Dread coiled within me as I realized the gravity of my situation. These men intended to cut something from me, something I couldn't fathom. Panic surged, and I pleaded with them, my voice quivering. "Please, you don't have to do this. I'll cooperate. Just tell me what you want." But my words fell on deaf ears. The mechanic began to prepare his instruments with a chilling calmness, his grin widening with every moment of my distress. The unknown man watched, his eyes gleaming with a cruel anticipation that sent shivers down my spine. As the minutes stretched into eternity, a fleeting thought of Caleb crossed my mind. The man I had met so recently, with his enigmatic claims and mysterious demeanor. But I quickly dismissed the idea that he would come to my rescue. It seemed absurd, an unlikely fantasy in the face of the nightmare that had become my reality. Plus, I wasn't sure if it was safer to be with him or these people. They all seemed just as insane. Desperation surged as the men in the room readied themselves for their gruesome task. I was trapped, alone, and facing an unimaginable fate. In that moment, I couldn't help but wonder if this is how I was going to die, alone and strapped to a cold operating table. The room seemed to close in around me, the air heavy with the threat of impending agony. The mechanic's twisted grin widened as he approached, his gleaming instruments poised to cut into me. Panic gnawed at the edges of my sanity, and I was on the brink of despair when the world outside the room erupted into chaos. Shouts and the sounds of a violent struggle reached my ears, and my tormentors froze in alarm. The stranger next to me, scalpel poised dangerously close to my throat, growled, "If anyone enters this room, she dies!" My heart hammered in my chest as I watched the doorway with a sense of desperate hope. It was then that the world shifted on its axis and the impossible unfolded before my eyes. The door burst open and a figure entered the room, a force of nature that seemed to defy reason. My breath caught as I recognized him. It was Caleb. But he was no longer the enigmatic man I had met before. He had transformed into something both terrifying and mesmerizing. In that heart-stopping moment, Caleb's true identity was revealed. He stood before me as a humanoid dragon, his powerful form exuding an otherworldly presence. His skin shimmered with iridescent scales that seemed to catch fire in the dim light, and his eyes blazed with a fiery intensity that seared into my soul. The mechanic and the unknown man faltered in the face of this otherworldly being, their bravado crumbling in the face of a dragon. Caleb's voice, a low, commanding rumble, filled the room as he declared, "Release her, now." The unknown man hesitated for a moment, the scalpel trembling in his grasp, but he ultimately made the wise choice, releasing me from my restraints and backing away, his gaze never leaving the formidable figure that was Caleb. With a grace and power that seemed surreal, Caleb swept me into his arms, shielding me from the horrors that had threatened to consume me. He held me close, his presence both protective and intimidating. As the room descended into a tense silence, I couldn't help but marvel at the incredible truth that had been unveiled. Caleb, the man who had claimed to be a dragon, was indeed something beyond human, a majestic and fearsome being who had come to my rescue. My heart raced with a mix of awe and terror, and I knew that my life had been forever altered by this extraordinary encounter. "Are you okay?" His voice came to me, and though I understood them, I found myself unable to answer. His supernatural appearance was still too captivating for me, and before I could even realize what was going on, his lips were on mine. Caleb's kiss was as unexpected as it was electrifying. As his lips met mine, a surge of warmth spread through my body, like a soothing balm for the pain and fear that had consumed me moments ago. I gasped against his mouth, my wounds seemingly healing before my very eyes. When our lips finally parted, Caleb's voice, a gentle rumble, filled the room. "You are my mate, Millie." The words hung in the air, a declaration that sent shockwaves through my mind. "Mate?" I whispered, my voice trembling with disbelief. "I don't even know you." My denial was met with a faint, sad smile from Caleb, as though he had expected my resistance. He lifted me into his arms, my protests falling on deaf ears, and carried me out of the room. Outside, another man waited, a syringe in his hand. Panic surged anew as I realized what was about to happen. I pleaded with Caleb to let me go, but my words were met with silence as the needle pierced my skin. Darkness closed in around me once more, and my consciousness faded into a swirling abyss. When I woke, I found myself in a lavish room, the soft glow of golden lamps casting a warm aura. The clothes I wore were different, and a sense of violation surged within me. I tried to sit up, my heart pounding with anxiety, but Caleb was there, his eyes meeting mine with an unsettling calmness. "Where am I?" I demanded, my voice quivering with anger and fear. Caleb's voice was soft, almost tender, as he replied, "You won't be able to leave, Millie." Dread settled in the pit of my stomach as I realized the depth of my predicament. I was trapped in a web of intrigue and danger, with Caleb at the center of it all. Desperation gnawed at my every thought as I made my way through the opulent labyrinth of Caleb's mansion. The lavish surroundings had transformed into a gilded prison, and I was determined to find an escape from this surreal nightmare. With each step, I sought out any possible exit, pushing through doors and searching for a way out. But as I turned corners and passed through hallways, the realization slowly began to sink in. Every path I took seemed to lead me deeper into the labyrinthine maze of Caleb's home. It was as if the very walls conspired against me, shifting and closing in around me, blocking any hope of freedom. Panic coursed through me, and I couldn't help but glance back, expecting to see Caleb hot on my heels. But he was nowhere to be found. His absence struck me as odd, given the urgency of our previous encounters. He had shown himself to be a formidable being, a dragon, and had claimed that I was his mate. Yet now, as I struggled to break free, he seemed strangely indifferent to my attempts. With a glimmer of hope, I found what appeared to be an exit, a grand, ornate door that beckoned me with the promise of escape. My heart raced as I approached it, my fingers trembling as they grasped the handle. But as I pushed the door open, I was met with a familiar sight. Caleb, standing before me like a sentinel, his expression unreadable. It was as though he had materialized out of thin air, blocking my path once again. My voice quivered with frustration and fear. "Why won't you let me leave?" Caleb's eyes, a tumultuous blend of emotions, met mine. "You cannot leave, Millie." His words sent a chill down my spine, and I was left to wonder if I would ever find a way out of this mesmerizing yet sinister web he had woven around me. The walls closed in, and the feeling of entrapment grew ever more suffocating, as I realized that every escape route had led me straight back into the clutches of the enigmatic dragon who claimed to be my mate. My world had turned into a whirlwind of confusion and disbelief. I stood in a room bathed in soft candlelight, my eyes adjusting to the warm glow as I tried to make sense of the surreal situation I found myself in. Caleb wasn't alone. With him were two more enigmatic figures, a man and a woman around our age. The guy, blessed with a tall and imposing presence, stepped forward with an air of authority. His voice was rich and commanding as he spoke. "Millie, allow me to introduce myself. I am Tony, and I serve as the advisor to Caleb, the Dragon King." Dragon King? The words echoed in my mind like a thunderclap, and I could hardly comprehend their meaning. I looked to Caleb, his eyes meeting mine with an unreadable intensity, as if he had been holding back the full truth. Tony continued, "You are the keeper of the dragon stone, Millie. It is your destiny to be Caleb's mate." The revelation struck me like a lightning bolt, leaving me stunned and speechless. It was a truth beyond anything I had ever imagined, a reality that defied reason and logic. Caleb, the man I had met so recently, was not just any man. He was a dragon king. And what was this dragon stone about? The striking woman next to Tony had an aura of ancient wisdom. She stepped forward, her eyes gentle yet penetrating. She addressed me with a softness that belied the gravity of her words. "Millie, my name is Celine. You must understand that all of us, as dragons, have lived for thousands of years. You, however, were reborn after being killed 40 years ago." The room seemed to spin around me as I struggled to absorb the enormity of what I was hearing. My mind grappled with the idea that I had died and been reborn, and that my very existence was crucial for the survival of these beings who claimed to be dragons. Celine's voice held a profound weight as she continued, "Your life is bound to ours, Millie. Without you, we are doomed. The dragon stone which you carry is the key to our survival." I clutched the azurite stone pendant around my neck, a symbol of my identity that had now become a symbol of something far greater. This was the dragon stone they were talking about. The implications of it all left me reeling, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of awe and fear at the destiny that had been thrust upon me. Caleb's moved closer to me. His eyes bore into mine with a stern determination that left no room for argument. The weight of his words hung heavily in the air, a palpable force pressing down on me. I stood before him, the room bathed in an eerie silence as he declared, "Millie, you have no choice but to accept your fate as my mate and the keeper of the Dragonstone." The words struck me like a bitter truth I couldn't swallow. I had been thrust into a world I didn't understand, a destiny that felt like an iron shackle around my wrist. The implications of it all were overwhelming, and I couldn't help but protest. "I can't be the person you think I am. I'm just ordinary. Sorry, but this is not for me." Caleb's patience seemed to wear thin, and his voice grew sharp with frustration. "There are others who will seek to take the Dragonstone from you, Millie. You know that. Only I can protect you from them. You have a responsibility, whether you like it or not." Tears welled up in my eyes as I refused to accept this fate that had been thrust upon me. "I don't want any of this. I never asked for it." In a sudden burst of anger, Caleb reached for the azurite stone pendant that hung around my neck, ripping it off with a force that left me gasping. The gold chain fell to the ground, and he clutched the stone in his fist. I watched in disbelief as he spat out, "You don't deserve this." With those bitter words, Caleb stormed out of the room, leaving me standing there, bewildered and upset. The room seemed to close in around me as I clutched the empty space where the pendant had once hung, a symbol of my identity, and now a stark reminder of the destiny I couldn't escape. Tears spilled down my cheeks as I struggled to make sense of it all. My world had been turned upside down, and I was left feeling lost and alone, without answers or understanding. As the echoes of Caleb's departure faded away, I found myself in the company of Tony and Celine, still grappling with the shock of the revelations that had been thrust upon me. The room, once filled with tension, had now settled into an uneasy calm. Tony, his expression thoughtful, began to explain, "Millie, I can't read the minds of other dragons. That's why we haven't been able to find out who killed you in your past life. The secrets of one dragon are hidden from another." I absorbed this information with a heavy heart, a sense of frustration gnawing at the edges of my consciousness. The truth of my past and the circumstances of my death remained a mystery I couldn't unravel. Desperation drove me to speak, my voice trembling with emotion. "Well, if this is all true, then I need to know more. I need to understand what happened to me." Tony exchanged a knowing glance with Celine, and then he nodded in agreement. "We can take you to the place where you were found. It's not far from here." My heart leaped at the prospect of getting closer to the truth, but my hope was quickly dampened. Celine's voice held a somber note as she added, "I know what you're thinking, but I'm afraid the cave you were found in as a baby, Millie, is not the same as the one where you died. The cave where you met your end was destroyed in an earthquake." The realization hit me like a heavy blow. The connection between the two caves, between the beginning and end of my life, was now severed. It seemed that the answers I sought remained just out of reach, like elusive shadows dancing at the edges of my consciousness. I couldn't help but wonder if the destruction of the cave that had claimed my life was a cruel twist of fate or a deliberate act. The mysteries surrounding my existence deepened, and I felt like a puzzle with missing pieces, unable to form a complete picture of who I was and why I had been brought back into this world as the keeper of the Dragonstone. The room seemed to hold its breath as I hesitated, then finally decided to share my own piece of the puzzle. "So you already know, I was found in a cave as a baby," I admitted, my voice trembling with vulnerability. "But maybe you're not aware that I was then taken to an orphanage and raised there." The revelation struck Tony and Celine like a bolt of lightning. Their expressions shifted from surprise to something akin to awe. It was Tony who finally broke the silence, his voice tinged with a note of realization. "We also have another revelation, Millie. Caleb's last name is Chasm. The necklace you wear was given to you when you became his mate, many centuries ago." The pieces of the puzzle began to fit together, and doubt gnawed at the edges of my skepticism. Caleb's interest in my necklace, the undeniable connection I had felt, and his reaction when I had refused my destiny as his mate. It all seemed to point toward a truth I had been reluctant to accept. A sense of unease settled over me as I considered the possibility that Tony and Celine might be telling the truth. The implications of it all were staggering, and I couldn't help but wonder if my life had been a web of deceit, secrets, and inexplicable destiny. I felt a growing sense of vulnerability and uncertainty. The mysteries surrounding my existence had deepened, and I was left with a sense of longing for answers that seemed both elusive and tantalizingly close. Later, a sense of unease gnawed at me as I explored the cavernous house, the grandeur of its opulent rooms a stark contrast to the turmoil within me. Every corner seemed to hold secrets, and I couldn't resist the urge to search for answers. It was in that moment of exploration that I stumbled upon a picture, a photograph that took my breath away. It depicted Caleb, standing beside a woman who looked exactly like me, wearing the azurite necklace that usually hung around my own neck. My fingers trembled as I reached out to touch the image, a sense of disorientation washing over me. I hesitated, torn between the need for answers and the fear of what I might uncover. It was then that I overheard Caleb's voice, his tone laced with doubt as he spoke to Tony and Celine. "I don't believe she's my mate," he confessed. "There's something about her that's different." My heart sank at his words, the ground beneath me feeling unsteady. The revelation was like a knife to my chest, a confirmation of my deepest fears. I continued to listen, unable to tear myself away, as Caleb's anger flared. "Mind your own business, Millie," he snapped, his words a bitter rebuke that cut through me like a blade. Hurt and confused, I retreated to the couch, my emotions in turmoil. It felt as though I was unraveling, like a thread being pulled in too many directions. It was then that Celine, her presence a source of solace, approached me and offered comforting words. "Rest, Millie," she advised gently. "You've had a long day." I nodded in response and made my way to my room, locking the door behind me as if to shield myself from the uncertainty that had taken root in my life. Alone, in the dimly lit room, I found my phone, a lifeline to the outside world that now seemed distant and unreachable. Tears welled up in my eyes as I considered reaching out for help, but the realization washed over me. There was no one to call. I had neither friends nor family. With a heavy heart, I placed my phone aside and curled up in the unfamiliar bed, hoping against hope that when I woke, this would all prove to be nothing more than a terrible dream. A soft knock on my bedroom door roused me from a restless slumber. I stirred, expecting it to be Celine with her comforting presence, but when I opened my eyes and saw Caleb standing there, my heart skipped a beat. A feeling of unease washed over me, and I hesitated, reluctant to let him in. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice tinged with a mixture of wariness and defiance. Caleb's gaze bore into mine, a warning glinting in his eyes. "I suggest you let me in, Millie, before I lose my patience." The threat hung in the air, and I reluctantly stepped aside, allowing him entry into my room. He carried a tray of food, and as he placed it on the table, his eyes caught mine, his expression inscrutable. "There's something I want to show you," he said cryptically, his tone brooking no argument. I followed him as he led me to a hidden balcony, concealed from view. As I stepped out onto it, I was struck by the breathtaking beauty that unfolded before me. The balcony overlooked a lush garden bathed in moonlight, with stars twinkling in the night sky. The view was nothing short of mesmerizing, a stark contrast to the turmoil that had engulfed my life. I turned to Caleb, unable to conceal my surprise. I had no idea this was here. He met my gaze, his eyes softening for a fleeting moment. "There's much you don't know, Millie." With a sense of reluctance, I followed Caleb back inside, my curiosity piqued. He gestured to the tray of food, insisting, "We need to talk. Eat." I sighed, recognizing the futility of resistance. I couldn't change my circumstances, and perhaps it was time to try and get along with everyone here, including him. As I sat across from Caleb, my mind was a whirlwind of confusion and conflicting emotions. The undeniable truth was that I found him undeniably attractive, even though I couldn't fully accept the extraordinary claims he had made about his true nature as a dragon shifter and our past life together. His words had upended my world, leaving me adrift in a sea of uncertainty. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Caleb than met the eye, and that there might be some truth to the enigmatic connection I felt. My contemplation was abruptly interrupted when Caleb proved his dragon identity in a way that left me utterly speechless. With a breathtaking transformation, he became a massive, awe-inspiring dragon, his scales shimmering with an otherworldly luster. In an instant, I found myself swept off my feet as he carried me into the night sky. The terror that coursed through me was indescribable as I clung to his scaly back, the wind roaring in my ears. I could hardly believe what was happening, and my heart raced with a mixture of awe and fear. But then, as we soared higher and higher, I lost my grip, and I tumbled through the air. Panic consumed me as I plummeted toward the earth, certain that this would be the end of my tumultuous journey. In that terrifying moment, I contemplated the implications of my existence as a dragon's mate and the keeper of the dragon stone. The idea that my mere presence could have such profound consequences weighed heavily on me. It was as if the weight of the world rested on my shoulders, and I couldn't help but wonder if ending my life might be the only way to prevent any potential chaos caused by the dragons. As I prepared to let go and surrender to the abyss below, Caleb's furious roar pierced the night. With astonishing speed, he swooped down and caught me in his massive claws, his anger and confusion evident in his draconic eyes. He landed with a thunderous thud, his scaly form shrinking and shifting back into his human guise. Caleb's voice was a volatile mixture of emotions as he demanded, "What were you thinking, Millie?" Tears streamed down my face as I struggled to find the words to explain my actions. My world had become a maze of contradictions, and I couldn't help but wonder if there was any way to untangle the mess that surrounded me. The overwhelming urge to escape from Caleb's presence still consumed me, but it seemed that no matter how hard I struggled, he had an uncanny ability to thwart my efforts. His strength held me in place, and I was left with no choice but to confront whatever was unfolding before me. I try to escape again, but he stops me by pulling on my arm. I yelp in pain and try to get away from his hold, but to no avail. With a swift and deliberate motion, Caleb cut and drew blood from both our palms, the crimson droplets forming a macabre connection between us. As our wounded hands met, an inexplicable and vivid purple essence swirled around our entwined fingers, like an arcane dance of unseen forces. Caleb's voice, now filled with a deep resonance, began to chant in an unknown language. His words reverberated through the air, resonating in the very core of my being. It was as if each syllable he uttered tugged at my soul, drawing it inexorably toward him. The sensation was both mesmerizing and disconcerting, as though I was being pulled into a vortex of unknown depths. The world around me blurred as the threads of reality seemed to fray, leaving me teetering on the precipice of something profound and inexplicable. Then, with a suddenness that left me breathless, Caleb's lips descended upon mine. The kiss was a fusion of heat and electricity, sending a strange tingling sensation coursing through my body. It was as though our connection had intensified, a mingling of our essences that defied reason and explanation. A burning sensation on my lower back intensified, and I couldn't help but gasp against his lips. It was a sensation that bordered on discomfort, yet it held a strange allure that I couldn't resist. I was caught in a whirlwind of emotions, confusion and curiosity warring within me as I struggled to make sense of the enigma that was this man, and the profound connection that bound us together. Felt something inside of me click. It felt as if for the first time in my life, the thing that I had been missing, the hole in my chest, had been filled. Right after that, a scorching sensation spread across the center of my lower back. My consciousness gradually emerged from the depths of darkness, but as I became aware of my surroundings, I realized I couldn't see a thing. I lay on what felt like a soft bed, and an inexplicable sense of presence surrounded me. With my eyes closed, I relied on my other senses. I sensed Celine, Tony, and Caleb in the room with me. Their distinct energies, their very essence, was like a symphony of familiar voices in my mind. It was as though I could feel their proximity, their concern, even without the need to open my eyes. But there was something else, a heartbeat that didn't belong, an unfamiliar rhythm that pulsed steadily in the background. It was a disconcerting sensation, and I couldn't quite place it. Then Caleb's voice broke through the silence, his words sending a ripple of unease through me. "Millie, do you remember what happened?" My mind was a jumbled labyrinth, memories elusive and fragmented. But as he spoke, a surge of recollection washed over me, like pieces of a puzzle falling into place. I remembered the sensation of riding on a dragon's back, the wind rushing past, and the sheer terror of falling from the sky. I remember, I admitted, my voice trembling with the clarity of the memory. It was a vivid image, the feeling of Caleb's arms wrapping around me as he caught me mid-fall, the sharp sting of a blade on both our palms, and that inexplicable kiss that seemed to bind us together in ways I couldn't comprehend. Celine and Tony, their presence still tangible in the room, confronted Caleb with a mix of anger and concern. They accused him of forcing a mating bond upon me without my consent, of taking away my choice in a matter that held immense consequences. Their words hung in the air, heavy with implications, and I couldn't help but wonder about the bond that now connected me to Caleb and what it might mean for my future. Too tired to stay awake, I realized my body hadn't yet healed from all the traumas of the past few hours. I fell again into deep slumber without being able to control it. I awoke later in the now dimly lit room, my body feeling heavy and sluggish. The remnants of sleep clung to me, but I forced my eyes open, pretending not to have heard the conversation that had transpired earlier. Weakness coursed through me, leaving me disoriented and vulnerable. Caleb, sensing my struggle, moved closer and helped me sit up. His touch was gentle, but I couldn't help but feel a surge of discomfort as I looked into his eyes. I needed answers, and I needed them now. "What happened?" I asked, my voice a mere whisper. Caleb sighed, his expression burdened with a weight I couldn't fully comprehend. "Millie, I bonded us. We're mates now." His words hung in the air like a heavy fog, and I struggled to grasp their full significance. A bond, a mating bond. It was a concept I couldn't quite wrap my mind around. He continued, explaining that the bond meant I couldn't take my own life again because our lives were now inexplicably linked. If I died, he would die too, and the finality of that revelation hit me like a sledgehammer. "I wish you'd let me die instead." The words tumbled from my lips before I could think, driven by the overwhelming weight of despair that had settled over me. Tears brimmed my eyes. "I never wanted this. I never wanted to share this bond with you." "What gave you the right to do it? Huh?" Caleb's reaction was swift and intense, his anger flaring like a wildfire. Without a word, he turned and left the room, leaving me alone with the stark reality of our newfound connection and the consequences of a choice that had irrevocably altered the course of my life. Guilt immediately gripped my heart because I saw the pain in his gaze, but what else could I have done? He was ruining my life. Celine remained by my side as Caleb left the room, her presence a source of comfort in the midst of my turmoil. She began to explain more about what it meant to be a dragon's mate, her voice gentle and patient. "As Caleb's mate, you're connected to him in ways that go beyond what you can imagine," Celine began. "It's a bond that transcends time and space, and it means that your destinies are intertwined. Your actions affect him and his affect you. It's a profound connection, one that can be both a blessing and a burden." I absorbed her words, still grappling with the enormity of what had transpired. The idea of being bound to Caleb in such a profound way was both fascinating and daunting. Celine continued, "Tony and I have been packing up your belongings. We're bringing them to your new home." The mention of my things reminded me of the world I had left behind, and I hesitated before making a request. "Can you bring me my laptop and books, please?" Celine nodded with a reassuring smile. "Of course, Millie. I'll make sure you have everything you need." Her tone then turned more serious, and she added, "You don't have to make this difficult, Millie. We understand that this is overwhelming, but we're here to help you. Try to understand our situation as well." As Celine left the room to retrieve my belongings, I was left alone with my thoughts. The events that had unfolded, the revelations about my past life, the newfound bond with Caleb, it was all a whirlwind of complexity that left me reeling. I contemplated everything that had happened and made a silent decision. I no longer wanted to end my life, but I was determined to find a way to escape this situation, to regain control over my own destiny. The path ahead was fraught with uncertainty, but I was resolved to navigate it with a newfound determination to uncover the truth and reclaim my freedom. Caleb's POV. The feeling of anger and frustration welled up within me like a tempestuous storm, threatening to engulf my every thought. Millie, the woman who had entered my life like a whirlwind, was both a blessing and a curse, a paradox I couldn't unravel. She bore the lovely face of my long-lost love, yet her behavior was an enigma, a puzzle I couldn't solve. She was her, but also her at the same time. I needed an outlet for the tumultuous emotions that churned within me, and I found solace in the cool embrace of the pool. The water was a soothing balm against my heated skin as I submerged myself beneath its surface, seeking refuge from the maelstrom of conflicting feelings that threatened to consume me. As I swam, the memories of my past love resurfaced, like ghostly apparitions in the recesses of my mind. Her smile, her laughter, the warmth of her touch. It was as though I could still feel her presence, even after all these years. And yet, Millie was not her. She looked the same, but her essence was different, her memories erased by some cruel twist of fate. Tony, ever the voice of reason, approached me by the poolside. He had been my confidant for centuries, a steadfast presence in my life. "Caleb," he began, his tone measured, "you should be grateful for Millie's return. Even if she doesn't remember our past, this is a second chance for both of you." I turned to him, my frustration boiling over. "But she's not her. Tony, she looks like her, but she's a stranger to me. She doesn't remember our love, our history. It's as if she's a different person entirely." Tony's gaze was filled with understanding, but he persisted. "Perhaps her memories will return with time. You must be patient, my friend. Fate has brought her back into your life for a reason." I shook my head, my anger unrelenting. I can't simply erase the past and replace it with this imposter. It's not fair to her, and it's certainly not fair to me. As Tony left me alone with my thoughts, I continued to swim, the water's embrace doing little to quell the storm of emotions raging within me. Millie's presence in my life was a conundrum I couldn't solve, a mystery I couldn't unravel, and it left me torn between the past and the uncertain future that now lay ahead. The pain of losing Millie had been an unrelenting ache in my heart, a wound that refused to heal over the centuries. I had searched for her relentlessly, across continents and through time, driven by an insatiable yearning to find her, to reclaim the love we had shared. Every night had been haunted by dreams of her, dreams that both comforted and tormented me. I could still see her face, her smile, her laughter, but they were ephemeral, slipping through my fingers like grains of sand. And every morning I would wake to the harsh reality of her absence, the emptiness of a life without her. When she finally returned to me, it was a moment I had longed for, a miracle I had never dared to hope for. But the shock of discovering that she had lost her memory was a bitter pill to swallow. The woman who stood before me bore the same face, the same name, but she was a stranger, a vessel devoid of the memories we had created together. I needed an escape, a respite from the whirlwind of emotions that threatened to consume me. The cold water of the shower was a shock to my senses, a reminder of the harsh reality I now faced. As the water cascaded over me, I couldn't help but reflect on the harsh truth that my beloved Millie was gone forever. The nightmares came to me each night, relentless in their torment. I would see her fall, her eyes filled with fear and desperation, and I would reach out to save her, but my efforts were in vain. Her life would slip away from me, like water through my fingers, and I would wake in a cold sweat, haunted by the memories of her death and my inability to save her. Each day was a battle, a struggle to come to terms with the fact that the woman I had loved so deeply was no more, and that I was left with an empty void that nothing could fill. The pain of losing her, of watching her slip away, was a wound that cut to the core of my soul, and I knew that I would carry it with me for all eternity. The torrent of emotions that swirled within me was a maelstrom of contradictions, a turbulent sea of love, anger, guilt, and sadness. Each feeling tugged at my heart like a relentless tide, leaving me torn and conflicted. In the depths of my soul, I still carried the profound love I had felt for the Millie of the past, the woman whose memory had haunted my dreams and fueled my relentless search for her. She was the embodiment of a love that had transcended time itself, a love that had once been my reason for living. But before me now stood an Millie, who bore the same name and the same face, yet was a stranger in every sense of the word. Her presence in my life was a harsh reminder of the past that could never be reclaimed, a past that had been stolen from us both. The guilt I felt was a heavy burden, a weight that pressed down on me with unrelenting force. I couldn't help but blame myself for the circumstances that had led to her memory loss, for the choices I had made, and for the chasm that now separated us. And amid the anger and frustration that threatened to consume me, there was also a deep well of sadness. Sadness for the love we had once shared, for the memories that were now lost to us, and for the woman who stood before me, trapped in a reality she could not remember. I was torn between the love I had once known and the resentment that now simmered beneath the surface. It was a conflict that raged within me, a battle of emotions that left me adrift in a sea of uncertainty. The past and the present were irreconcilable forces, and I was left to navigate the treacherous waters that lay between them, my heart heavy with the weight of a love that could never be fully realized. The thought that I hadn't eaten a single morsel all day struck me with a pang of self-neglect. My emotional turmoil had consumed me, leaving little room for the mundane necessities of life, like sustenance. With a heavy sigh, I made my way to the kitchen, my steps slow and weary. The aroma of food greeted me as I entered, a reminder of the simple comforts I had neglected. I needed to nourish myself, if only to gather the strength to confront the complexities of my situation. The aroma of freshly cooked food filled the air as I stood in the kitchen, mechanically preparing a meal. It had been a while since I had taken the time to nourish myself, my emotional turmoil leaving little room for such mundane concerns. But the arrival of Tony had brought with it a reminder that I couldn't afford to neglect my own well-being. Tony's voice reached me from the doorway, his tone filled with concern. "Caleb, you should bring Millie down to eat as well. She needs sustenance." I hesitated, my initial instinct being to resist, but then a heavy realization washed over me. I had marked Millie as my mate, and I was keeping her against her will. It was my responsibility to ensure her well-being, even if it was a situation neither of us had chosen. With a resigned sigh, I nodded to Tony. "You're right, I'll go and bring her down." As I made my way to Millie's room, I couldn't help but feel a strange mix of emotions. The mutual attraction between us was undeniable, a magnetic pull that seemed to transcend the complexities of our situation. But I pushed those feelings aside, focusing on the task at hand. I knocked softly on her door and waited for her response. When she opened the door, her presence was a mesmerizing sight, her eyes meeting mine with a mix of curiosity and uncertainty. There was a palpable tension between us, a connection that defied explanation. "Millie," I began, my voice gentle, "it's time to come downstairs and eat. You need sustenance." She hesitated for a moment before nodding in agreement. As she stepped out of her room, I couldn't help but notice the way her eyes lingered on me, a subtle but undeniable attraction that mirrored my own. I offered her a small smile, the complexities of our situation weighing heavily on both of us. But for now, the simple act of sharing a meal was a step toward bridging the chasm that separated us. We sat across from each other at the dining table, the atmosphere heavy with unspoken tension as we shared our meal. The clinking of utensils against plates echoed in the silence, a stark reminder of the complexities that had brought us together. I decided to break the ice, hoping to find some common ground. "Millie," I began, my voice soft, "have you had a chance to start reading the books I recommended to you?" Her gaze shifted momentarily, a flicker of discomfort in her eyes, before she nodded. "Yes, I've started reading them." But something in her tone, the slight hesitation in her response, made me suspect otherwise. I had a feeling that she hadn't actually read a single page of those books. "You're not being entirely truthful, Millie," I said, my voice gentle but unwavering. She tensed, her eyes narrowing as she met my gaze. "What do you mean?" I leaned in slightly, my gaze locking onto hers. "I can tell when someone hasn't really read a book they claim to have. The way you responded, it was clear that you're not familiar with the content." Her cheeks flushed with a mixture of embarrassment and frustration. "Geez, you caught me," she admitted, her tone defensive. "I haven't had the chance to read them yet." I sighed, understanding that her reaction was likely fueled by her frustration at being kept here against her will. "Millie, it's okay. You don't have to lie about something like that. But I encourage you to start reading them soon if you want to know more about our kind. This is very important, and I don't think you're taking this matter seriously." "Believe me, I am. After all, it's messing with my entire existence. I'm just saying. But she seemed unwilling to let go of her defensiveness, and with a swift motion, she pushed her plate away, gathering her uneaten food. I'm not hungry anymore. Excuse me. As she left the table, her abrupt departure left me with a sense of unease. The fragile thread of connection that had briefly emerged between us seemed to have snapped, and I couldn't help but wonder if our bond was destined to remain fraught with misunderstandings and discord. I needed a break from the suffocating atmosphere of the house, the constant reminder of our complicated situation weighing on me. I knew that Tony would be watching over Millie, and I trusted him to keep her safe, even if it meant taking necessary precautions. So, I left the house behind, my footsteps leading me to Millie's former residence. The memories that lingered within its walls were bittersweet, a testament to a past that felt simultaneously distant and achingly close. Inside, I wandered through the rooms, each one holding a piece of her that I had come to know. Her favorite chair by the window, the artwork that adorned the walls, the scent of her perfume that still clung to the air, it all served as a poignant reminder of the woman I had loved. I made a mental note of the things she liked, her favorite snacks, the brand of tea she preferred, and the scented candles that filled her home. It was a list that I intended to give to my maid, a small gesture to make her more comfortable during her stay at the house. As I stood in the quiet solitude of Millie's apartment, I couldn't help but wonder if there was a way to bridge the gap that separated us. Our situation was fraught with challenges, but I was determined to find a way to make her feel more at ease, to show her that my intentions were not solely driven by duty, but also by a desire to protect and care for her. As I stood in Millie's apartment, my heart heavy with the memories it held, my eyes caught something unusual. A small hole in the wall, as if someone had been spying on her from the neighboring apartment. Suspicion and anger coursed through me like a tidal wave. Who could have been invading her privacy in such a manner? Without a second thought, I stormed out of her apartment and barged into the empty unit next door. What I discovered within left me seething with rage. The room was adorned with countless pictures of Millie, photographs taken without her knowledge or consent, capturing moments of her life in intimate detail. It was a violation of her privacy that I could not ignore. My anger flared, and without hesitation, I decided to take action. In a fit of fury, I set the room on fire, the flames dancing in a chaotic frenzy. I took a picture of the blaze with my phone and sent it to Tony, instructing him to put out the fire before it could cause any harm to the neighboring apartments. With my task completed, I left the scene behind, my heart still heavy with anger and frustration. Whoever had been spying on Millie, invading her life in such a despicable manner, would face the consequences of their actions. It was a stark reminder of the dangers that surrounded us, the threats that lurked in the shadows, and my unwavering determination to protect Millie at all costs. Millie's POV. The hours passed quietly as I immersed myself in the pages of Caleb's books. The knowledge they held was a gateway into a world I had never known existed, the realm of the Dragon Kings and the intricate tapestry of their history. With each word I devoured, the mysteries surrounding my own existence began to unravel. The Dragon King's origins were shrouded in legend and myth, dating back to a time long before recorded history. They were beings of immense power, guardians of ancient secrets and keepers of the Dragonstone, a relic that held the fate of all dragons. It was a responsibility that had been passed down through generations, a burden that only the keeper of the Dragonstone could bear. As I read, the weight of that responsibility settled upon my shoulders. I came to understand that I was not merely an innocent bystander in this world of dragons and legends. I was the keeper of the Dragonstone, destined to safeguard the very essence of their existence. It was a revelation that filled me with a sense of purpose, a realization that my life held a greater significance than I had ever imagined. The book spoke of dire consequences should the keeper of the Dragonstone meet an untimely end. If I were to die, it would trigger a catastrophic chain reaction, causing the death of all dragons and unleashing mass destruction upon the earth. The very balance of the world depended on my survival. With this newfound understanding, I made a silent vow to myself. I would do everything in my power to stay alive, to protect not only myself, but the delicate equilibrium of the world. My life had taken a sudden and unexpected turn, thrusting me into a world of magic and legend, and I was determined to rise to the challenge. As I closed the final book, my mind was filled with the weight of my newfound knowledge. The path ahead was uncertain and fraught with danger, but I was no longer a passive observer in my own life. I was the keeper of the Dragonstone, and my destiny was intertwined with that of the dragons. With a newfound determination, I was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, for the fate of the world now rested in my hands. The revelation that Caleb, the enigmatic Dragon King, had a responsibility to protect me as the keeper of the Dragonstone, his fated mate, was a weighty one. It added a layer of complexity to our already intricate connection, and I couldn't help but wonder how this newfound knowledge would shape our interactions in the days to come. As I stepped out of my room, I noticed a collection of new clothes and personal items neatly arranged outside the door. It was a thoughtful gesture, one that I could only assume had been provided by Caleb himself. The clothes were unlike anything I had ever worn, an intriguing blend of modern fashion and timeless elegance. The personal items, from toiletries to a set of jewelry, were equally luxurious. With a sense of curiosity and gratitude, I picked out a set of clothing and made my way to the bathroom. The warm water of the bath was a welcome indulgence, washing away the weariness that had clung to me since my arrival. As I soaked in the soothing embrace of the water, I couldn't help but reflect on the strange turn my life had taken. Dressed in the new clothes, I felt a renewed sense of confidence and purpose. The soft fabric against my skin and the subtle scent of the toiletries added a touch of luxury to my day. It was a simple gesture, but it filled me with a sense of gratitude and goodwill. Leaving the bathroom, I found myself in a surprisingly good mood, a feeling of optimism for the first time since my world had been turned upside down. The challenges that lay ahead were still daunting, but in that moment, I was determined to face them with grace and resilience. As I moved through the unfamiliar surroundings of Caleb's home, I couldn't help but wonder what the future held for me as the keeper of the Dragonstone. It was a path fraught with uncertainty, but I was ready to embrace it, one step at a time, with the newfound strength and purpose that the day had brought me. The kitchen was bathed in soft morning light as I entered, a sense of quietude filling the space. At the kitchen island stood a woman, her presence serene and unmoving. I greeted her with a friendly smile, but there was no response, just an eerie silence that hung in the air. Confusion crept over me, and I turned to Caleb, who had followed me into the kitchen. "Who is she?" I asked, my voice tinged with uncertainty. Caleb's gaze settled on the woman, his expression impassive. "She's one of my dragons," he explained tersely, "and she's been ordered not to interact with you." The revelation left me feeling unsettled, a knot of frustration and helplessness forming in my chest. The woman's presence seemed more like a phantom than a living being, and the idea that she was under Caleb's control was deeply unsettling. I turned to Caleb, my voice trembling with indignation. "Caleb, this is not right. You can't just control people like this, especially someone who appears to be a person with feelings." His response was measured, his tone unyielding. "I have my reasons, Millie." But I wasn't willing to back down. The desire for freedom, for agency over my own life, had grown too strong within me to be ignored any longer. I made up my mind then and there. It was time to confront Caleb, to challenge the control he held over me and those around me. As I left the kitchen, determination burned within me, and I began to formulate a plan. I would find a way to get Tony and Celine on my side, to make them see that my desire for freedom was not a threat to their world. Together, we would find a way to escape this gilded cage and forge a path toward a future of our choosing. The house that had once felt like a prison would soon become the battleground for my fight for autonomy, a fight that I was determined to win, no matter the cost. The breakfast table was set with an array of dishes, but the atmosphere in the room was far from inviting. Caleb's moodiness hung in the air like a dark cloud, casting a pall over what should have been a simple meal. I couldn't help but feel a surge of defiance rising within me as I sat across from him. The unease and frustration that had been building within me in recent days reached a boiling point, and I was no longer willing to tolerate Caleb's control and secrecy. I decided to break the tense silence that enveloped us. "Caleb," I began, my voice steady but firm, "we need to talk." He looked up from his plate, his expression guarded. "About what, Millie?" "About everything," I replied, my gaze unwavering. "About why I'm here, about the dragons, about the woman in the kitchen. I deserve answers." Caleb's jaw tensed, and he seemed to consider his response carefully. Before he could reply, the sound of footsteps approaching the dining room drew our attention. Celine and Tony entered the room, their presence offering a brief respite from the tension. Celine's eyes met mine, and there was a silent understanding that passed between us. With a warm smile, Celine extended an invitation. "Millie, would you like to leave the house with me today? It might do you good to get some fresh air." I turned my gaze to Caleb, who hesitated for a moment, his reluctance evident. But then, Celine added a persuasive promise. "Tony will accompany us. You have my word, Caleb." Caleb's features softened slightly, and he gave a reluctant nod. "Very well, but be careful." As I rose from the table, a sense of relief washed over me. I had taken a small step toward asserting my independence, toward gaining the freedom to explore the world beyond the confines of the house. Yet as I stepped out of the imposing villa with Celine and Tony by my side, a sense of uncertainty and suspicion gnawed at the edges of my thoughts. The invitation to leave the house had been extended with an air of congeniality, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this outing than met the eye. The car ride was marked by a sense of tension, my confusion and suspicion growing with each passing mile. I couldn't shake the feeling that this outing held more significance than a simple change of scenery. Celine and Tony's cheerful conversation did little to ease my unease, and I cast furtive glances out of the window, watching as the familiar landscape of my past rushed by. As we pulled up to my former home, I couldn't help but feel a mix of nostalgia and apprehension. The house had once been a haven of normalcy, a place where my life had unfolded without the weight of secrets and enigmatic prophecies. Now, it stood as a relic of a past that felt distant and disconnected from the strange new world I had been thrust into. Why are we here? I finally voiced the question that had been gnawing at me, my tone betraying my suspicion. Celine exchanged a significant look with Tony before offering a calm and measured response. "We thought it might be a good idea for you to revisit your old life, Millie, to reconnect with your past." The explanation seemed reasonable on the surface, but I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that there was more to their intentions than met the eye. The unease that had simmered within me since my arrival in Caleb's world intensified, and I couldn't help but wonder if there were hidden agendas at play. Stepping into my former home, I felt a rush of memories flood over me. Familiar rooms, familiar scents, everything felt simultaneously comforting and foreign. But as I walked through the house, my unease grew, a sense that I was being watched, that every corner held secrets I had yet to uncover. Our journey took an unexpected turn when we arrived at my neighbor's house. I watched in confusion as Celine and Tony led me inside, their expressions grave. The room we entered was unlike any other, a chilling tableau of photographs, an eerie shrine to my life. My heart skipped a beat as I saw the walls adorned with countless pictures of me, moments from my life captured without my knowledge or consent. It was a violation of my privacy on a scale I could barely comprehend. I turned to Celine and Tony, my voice trembling with disbelief. "What is all this? Who did this?" Celine's expression was somber as she responded, "Millie, your neighbor has been spying on you for years. Caleb discovered this room and burned it down." The revelation sent shivers down my spine, a sense of violation and anger coursing through me. I couldn't fathom how someone could invade my life in such a grotesque manner. As I gazed at the pictures, a chilling realization washed over me. My life had never truly been my own, and the web of secrets and deception that surrounded me was far more intricate than I had ever imagined. My shock and distress grew as I stood amidst the room filled with pictures of my life, a sickening invasion of my privacy. It was a violation on a scale I could scarcely comprehend. The realization that I had been watched, catalogued, and spied upon for years left me feeling exposed and vulnerable. Celine's voice broke through the stunned silence. "Millie, Caleb discovered this room and destroyed all the evidence of the spying." I turned to her, my emotions a tumultuous whirlwind. But why? Why would someone do this to me? Celine's expression was sympathetic as she reached out to place a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "Millie, you have to understand that Caleb cares about you. He's trying to protect you." Her words were intended to soothe, but I couldn't bring myself to accept them. The idea that Caleb had known about this invasion of my privacy and had kept it from me only fueled my anger and mistrust. I pulled away from Celine's touch, my determination hardening. "I don't care why he did it. I need to get out of here." Celine and Tony exchanged a knowing glance, and I could see the worry in their eyes. They knew that my desire to escape was growing stronger by the day, and they seemed to understand that it was a matter of time before I made my move. With a sense of grim determination, I finally agreed to help them pack up my house. It was an opportunity to gather my belongings and prepare for the day when I would make my escape. The world outside held unknown dangers, but the thought of freedom was a beacon of hope that I couldn't ignore. As I helped Celine and Tony pack up my house, my mind was consumed with thoughts of escape. Every item I placed into a box, every piece of my past that I carefully wrapped was a step closer to freedom. I had to find a way out of this web of secrets, away from Caleb's control. The opportunity presented itself when I suddenly felt an urgent need to use the bathroom. It was a small window of opportunity, and I seized it. "Excuse me, I need to use the bathroom," I said, my voice shaking only slightly with feigned urgency. Celine and Tony exchanged a glance, and Tony nodded. "Of course, Millie. We'll continue packing." As I entered the bathroom, I closed the door behind me and took a moment to catch my breath. My heart raced with anticipation, and I knew I had to act quickly. My eyes scanned the room, and they fell upon a small window positioned above the bathtub. It was a slim chance, but it was my only chance. I stepped into the tub, my hands reaching for the window frame. With a deep breath, I pushed against it, and to my surprise, it budged. The window squeaked open, revealing a narrow gap to the outside world. Carefully, I squeezed myself through the opening, praying that my escape wouldn't be detected. The cool breeze greeted me as I landed outside, on the ground below. I had managed to slip away without making a sound. As I stood in the darkness, a sense of exhilaration and fear surged through me. I was free, but I had no idea what awaited me beyond the confines of Caleb's house. Without wasting another moment, I began to run, my footsteps echoing through the quiet streets. After a few blocks, I slowed my pace, my mind racing with thoughts of where to go next. I needed a plan, a place to hide. And then it hit me. A mechanic shop I had passed by several times during my time in this neighborhood. The shop's owner always left the car keys inside, a fact that had stuck in my memory. With newfound determination, I changed my direction and headed towards the mechanic shop. It was a risky move, but I had no other choice. The keys to the car were my ticket to freedom, and I was willing to take any chance to break free from the shadows that had consumed my life. The engine roared to life as I turned the key, the car responding with a smooth purr. I was on the road again, a sense of freedom coursing through me as I left Caleb's house and the oppressive atmosphere that had hung over it behind. As I drove, I glanced over at the passenger seat and noticed a wallet lying there, filled with $100 bills neatly stacked in rows. It was an unexpected find, and I couldn't help but wonder if it was meant to assist in my escape. Without hesitation, I grabbed the wallet, realizing that I now had access to a considerable amount of money. Hours passed as I drove, the road stretching out endlessly before me. With the wallet's contents, I had the means to start anew, to forge a life away from the shadows of the past. It was a bittersweet realization, one that carried both hope and uncertainty. Eventually, I decided to stop at a Walmart to purchase some essentials. I needed a new laptop, a prepaid phone, and a change of clothes. As I perused the store's aisles, I found myself fortunate once again. More stacks of cash were hidden in the car, providing me with additional resources to fund my escape. Leaving the store with my purchases in tow, I returned to the car and continued driving. With each passing mile, I began to formulate a plan for my next steps. First and foremost, I needed to replace my identification cards. The life I had left behind was gone, and I needed a new identity to survive. Then I would need to acquire a different car, one that wouldn't be easily traced back to me. And with the substantial amount of cash I now possessed, it was essential to establish a secure bank account where I could safely deposit my newfound wealth. As the road stretched out before me, I knew that my journey was just beginning. The path to freedom was fraught with challenges and uncertainties, but I was determined to navigate it. I had escaped Caleb's grasp, and I was ready to reclaim my life on my terms, whatever it took. The city I had reached was vast and bustling, a stark contrast to the quiet streets I had left behind. It was a place where anonymity could be found, where I could disappear into the crowds and leave behind the life that had bound me for so long. I needed to be cautious, to leave no trace of my true identity. After some searching, I found a hotel that didn't require identification. It was a modest place, but it offered a safe haven from prying eyes. As I settled into my room, I knew I had to take the next crucial step in my escape plan. I needed new identification. I had reached out to someone online who claimed to be able to provide me with the necessary documents. With a mixture of anxiety and determination, I arranged to meet this stranger in a dimly lit alley, the weight of my decisions pressing heavily upon me. The meeting was tense, a dance of mistrust as I handed most of my economies in exchange for a new life on paper. The man provided me with a new driver's license, passport, social security card, birth certificate, and even a high school diploma. It was an illicit transaction, one that would allow me to start anew, free from the constraints of my past. As I held those forged documents in my hands, a sense of exhilaration coursed through me. I was no longer Millie Chasm, the keeper of the Dragonstone, bound by prophecies and secrets. I was a blank slate, ready to write my own story. Sitting in the hotel room, I began to plan my travels. The world was vast, and I had the means to explore it like never before. Rome, or Roma as it's known locally, was the first destination that came to mind. I had seen pictures of the Colosseum, and I wondered if its grandeur was as impressive in real life as it appeared in photographs. With my new identity and a sense of newfound freedom, I allowed myself a moment of excitement. The world was my oyster, and I was determined to savor every moment of the adventure that lay ahead. Caleb's POV. Fury coursed through me like a wildfire as the words left Tony's lips. Millie, the one I was meant to protect, had slipped through my grasp. Her absence stung like a raw wound, and I could feel the weight of my failure bearing down on me. "What do you mean, she's gone?" I growled, my voice laced with anger and disbelief. I couldn't fathom how this could have happened. Tony, ever the calm and composed one, met my gaze evenly. "I went to check on her, Caleb, and her room was empty. There was a note saying she needed to find her own path." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Millie had made a choice to run from her destiny. It was a choice I couldn't accept. I had failed in my duty to keep her safe, and the guilt and anger surged within me. My temper flared, and I turned on Tony, unable to contain my frustration. "This is your responsibility as well. You should have been more vigilant." Tony's jaw tightened, but he held my gaze firmly. "I take full responsibility for this, Caleb. But right now, our priority should be to find her before she gets too far." He was right, of course. Millie was out there alone, vulnerable, and I couldn't let her wander the world without protection. My anger still simmered beneath the surface, but I couldn't let it cloud my judgment. With a reluctant nod, I took a deep breath, trying to calm the raging storm inside me. "You're right, Tony. We need to find her, and we need to do it quickly. She's the keeper of the Dragonstone, and her safety is paramount." Tony's expression softened slightly, and he nodded in agreement. "I can help you track her. We'll use her email and credit card usage to narrow down her location." We moved to the room where Celine was already at work on her laptop, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she sifted through Millie's digital footprint. Having their assistance in this dire situation was a small comfort. Hours turned into a relentless search through Millie's emails and credit card transactions, but our efforts yielded nothing. Millie had left without her wallet, phone, and laptop, making it nearly impossible to trace her. I couldn't contain my frustration any longer, slamming a hand against the table. This is maddening. She's covered her tracks well. Tony, ever the voice of reason, placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. We won't give up. We'll find her. With renewed determination, I made a decision. We need to split up. You head west, and I'll go east. We'll cover as much ground as possible. Tony nodded in agreement, and we set off on our separate paths, determined to track down Millie and bring her back safely. My search for Millie took me to various locations where false identifications were known to be made. Each stop was a glimmer of hope, a potential clue that could lead me to her. My heart raced with anticipation, my determination unyielding. The forgers and document manipulators I encountered were uncooperative, wary of a stranger prying into their illegal activities. I showed them the forged documents Millie had used to escape, hoping to elicit some recognition, but it proved futile. Millie had covered her tracks well, and no one seemed to have seen her. After visiting several such locations without success, my frustration grew, and I was on the verge of losing hope. It was then that my phone buzzed, and a text message from Celine appeared on the screen. My spirits lifted as I read her message, a potential lead. I wasted no time in tracking down the teenager mentioned in Celine's message. He was a jittery young man with shifty eyes, clearly uncomfortable with my presence. But I pressed him, my tone firm but not threatening, and eventually he spilled what he knew. She was here, man, the teenager said, his voice shaking. She needed some documents, like a passport and stuff. I made 'em for her. My heart leaped at the revelation. Millie had been here, and this teenager held the key to finding her. I needed more information, and I leaned in, urging him to share everything he knew. He hesitated, but eventually provided an address where Millie had stayed temporarily. It led me to a rundown hotel on the outskirts of the city, a place that had seen better days. My heart raced as I approached the front desk, a bead of sweat forming on my brow. I inquired about Millie Chasm, describing her as a woman with a distinctive presence. The receptionist, a bored-looking individual, consulted the logbook before confirming my suspicions. She left about an hour ago, she informed me in a disinterested tone, as if my concern meant nothing to her. My frustration surged, but I couldn't afford to lose my composure now. I asked if there was anything left behind in her room, anything that could provide a clue to her whereabouts. The receptionist pointed me toward Millie's room, a nondescript door down a dimly lit corridor. I entered cautiously, my senses on high alert. The room was modest, with little to suggest its previous occupant's identity. My eyes scanned the room, searching for any sign of Millie or a hint of her intentions. And then I found it. A list of countries and cities, scribbled hastily on a notepad. It was a potential roadmap of her journey, a breadcrumb trail she had left behind. I snapped a photo of the list, sending it to Tony and Celine with a terse message. Another lead. She's still on the move. As I left the hotel, my mind raced with possibilities. Millie was out there, and I was determined to find her. She had covered her tracks well, but I wouldn't give up. Having gathered the crucial information about Millie's recent whereabouts, I contacted Tony and Celine to update them on my findings. The list of countries and cities scrawled in Millie's room was our best lead yet, and we couldn't afford to let it slip through our fingers. Found a potential trail, I typed into the message. Heading back to regroup and plan our next move. Their responses came quickly, both expressing their relief and anticipation. We were a united front, determined to bring Millie back where she belonged. As I drove back to our temporary headquarters, my mind churned with thoughts of Millie. She was resourceful, that much was clear. Despite her initial reluctance to accept her role as the keeper of the Dragon's Stone, she had adapted to the situation and managed to escape my watchful eye. Upon returning to our base, I approached the teenager who had given me the crucial information. He was jittery, his nerves palpable, but he had proven his worth. I needed one more favor from him, a copy of the false identification he had created for Millie. After some tense negotiations, he handed me a small envelope containing the forged documents. It was a small victory, a tangible piece of Millie's escape plan. With these documents in hand, we would have an edge in tracking her movements. With the false identification secured, I continued my relentless search for Millie. I was impressed by her ability to disappear into the vast world, creating a new identity and evading my pursuit. It was a testament to her determination and strength of character. As days turned into weeks, I found myself contemplating our eventual reunion. When I finally found her, what would I say? How would she react to my presence? The uncertainty gnawed at me, but one thing was certain: Millie was my mate, and I would do whatever it took to protect her, even from herself. With every step of my search, I grew more resolute. Millie may have slipped through my fingers once, but I wouldn't let it happen again. The Dragonstone had returned to her, a beacon of hope that would guide me to her side once more. My escape from Canada marked the beginning of a whirlwind journey around the world. I traveled through France, with its romantic ambience and centuries of history. Germany greeted me with its blend of modernity and tradition, while Italy's ancient ruins and artistry captured my imagination. The United Kingdom's rich culture and diverse landscapes were a testament to its storied past, and China's vibrant cities and ancient wonders left me in awe. With each new destination, I felt a strange sense of familiarity, as if I had been there before. It was as though echoes of a forgotten past whispered in my ear, hinting at memories long buried. The feeling tugged at my soul, leaving me both exhilarated and unsettled. Yet, amid the breathtaking sights and diverse cultures, I couldn't shake the nagging suspicion that I was being followed. Paranoia gnawed at the edges of my consciousness, making me glance over my shoulder more often than I cared to admit. I couldn't pinpoint who or what might be tracking me, but the sensation was undeniable. Despite the uncertainty and the shadowy presence I felt, my determination to stay hidden remained steadfast. I had embarked on this journey to evade Caleb and his dragons, to break free from the destiny they had thrust upon me. As I traversed the globe, I clung to my newfound freedom, cherishing every moment of anonymity and independence. My travels were a blend of wonder and trepidation, a quest for self-discovery and escape. I yearned to unlock the secrets of my past and find answers to the questions that had plagued me for so long. But with every new step, I also knew that the world held its own mysteries, and I was just beginning to uncover them. The bustling streets of New York City became my refuge, a place where I could blend into the crowd, a nameless face in the urban sea. Yet even in this vast metropolis, paranoia gripped me. I couldn't escape the feeling that I was being watched, that familiar eyes followed my every move. It was that particular car, an expensive, sleek machine that seemed to materialize wherever I went. Whether I wandered through Central Park or strolled down Fifth Avenue, it was there, a silent sentinel in the shadows. The mere sight of it sent shivers down my spine, and I couldn't shake the suspicion that it harbored something sinister. One night, after indulging in a late-night slice at a local pizza parlor, I emerged onto the dimly lit street, the scent of cheese and tomato sauce still clinging to my senses. That's when they cornered me. A group of burly men who moved with a calculated precision that sent alarm bells ringing in my head. Their leader stepped forward, a sinister smile playing on his lips as he addressed me. "You've caught the boss's eye, sweetheart. He's been watching you, and he's taken quite an interest." I took a step back, my heart racing, the adrenaline surging through my veins. "I don't know what you're talking about," I stammered, my voice trembling. The man's eyes narrowed, and his cronies closed in, their imposing figures blocking any avenue of escape. "Let me make things clear," he continued, his tone turning menacing. "Our boss wants you to be his wife. He's willing to provide for you, give you everything you could ever dream of." Panic welled up within me, and I couldn't think straight. I had to escape, to run, to find a way out of this terrifying situation. But as I made a move to flee, one of the men lunged at me, his strong arms encircling my waist. I gasped as I was thrown to the ground, the impact knocking the breath from my lungs. I struggled against their grasp, my mind racing, trying to come up with a plan, any plan, that would save me from these menacing figures. My thoughts darted back to Caleb and Tony, my past life, and the danger they represented. Were they behind this? Had they finally caught up to me? As I fought against my captors, I knew that I couldn't let myself become a pawn in their game. I had to find a way out of this predicament. As the menacing figures closed in, their intentions dark and their grip unyielding, despair began to wash over me. I was trapped, helpless, with no way out. But just when I thought all hope was lost, a sudden commotion shattered the tension of the moment. From above, two shadowy figures descended like avenging angels, their forms illuminated briefly by the city's dim glow. My heart skipped a beat as I recognized one of them. It was Caleb. He had been tracking me all along, and now, in my darkest hour, he had come to my rescue. With a swift and graceful motion, Caleb intercepted the men who sought to harm me. His presence alone was enough to send a shiver of fear through their ranks, but it was his strength and determination that truly turned the tide. In the blink of an eye, the odds had shifted in my favor. Caleb fought with a fierce and controlled intensity, effortlessly disarming my would-be attackers. His movements were a blur of power and precision, and I couldn't help but marvel at his skill. Even as I lay on the ground, my breath ragged and my heart pounding. When the confrontation had ended, Caleb turned his attention to me, his gaze filled with a mixture of concern and frustration. Without a word, he helped me to my feet, and with an arm around my shoulders, guided me away from the scene of danger. We made our way back to my apartment in silence, the city's nocturnal sounds serving as the backdrop to our unspoken thoughts. My emotions were a turbulent storm, torn between relief at being saved and anger at Caleb for once again intruding into my life. As we reached the relative safety of my apartment, I knew that the questions and confrontations were inevitable. Caleb had rescued me, but at what cost? Caleb's presence in my apartment was a stark reminder of the past I had been desperately trying to escape. As he confronted me about my travels, his voice held a mix of frustration and concern. "Where have you been, Millie?" he demanded, his eyes searching mine for answers. I hesitated for a moment, my mind racing with conflicting emotions. I had been on the run, trying to distance myself from the world I had known, a world that revolved around dragons, prophecies, and an inexplicable bond that tied me to Caleb. I needed to get away, I finally admitted, my voice wavering. I needed to be free. Caleb's expression softened, and he took a step closer to me, his eyes never leaving mine. "I understand that, Millie, but you can't run forever. You belong with me, with your true family." His words stirred something within me, a sense of longing, of belonging that I had tried so hard to deny. Despite the turmoil and confusion of my past, there was a part of me that had missed Caleb, missed the connection that bound us together. I took a deep breath, my resolve faltering. "I don't know if I can go back to that life, Caleb," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. He reached out and gently cupped my face, his touch sending a shiver down my spine. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." I looked into his eyes and noticed his jaw clenching in seductive and yet so scary manner. In that moment, I realized that despite the chaos and uncertainty of our past, there was a bond between us that I couldn't ignore, a bond that had been forged long before I could even remember. "He's my mate." The tension in the room hung thick as Caleb's words sliced through the air, demanding my attention and submission. He had found me, cornered me, and now he was insisting that my self-imposed vacation was over. "Millie," he began, his voice firm, "it's time to come home." I met his stern gaze with a defiant one of my own. I had spent months on the road, trying to outrun the destiny that had been thrust upon me. I had tasted a semblance of freedom, and I wasn't ready to relinquish it so easily. "No," I said firmly, my voice unwavering. "I won't go back." Caleb's eyes narrowed, and for a moment it felt like the room itself was holding its breath, waiting for one of us to yield. The silent standoff continued, neither of us willing to back down. I could see the frustration in his eyes, the longing for things to go back to the way they once were. But I couldn't ignore the fear that came with that desire, the fear of losing myself in a world of dragons and prophecies. Time seemed to stretch on, the tension between us escalating with each passing moment. I knew I couldn't keep running forever, but I wasn't ready to give in just yet. It was so hard to say no to him, and I didn't understand why. Finally, with a heavy sigh, I broke the silence. "Fine, whatever, I'll go back." Relief washed over his features, and he reached out to touch my arm gently, as if fearing I might disappear if he pressed too hard. I couldn't help but feel a pang of regret at the defeat I had just accepted, but I knew that for now, I had no other choice. As we prepared to leave, I couldn't help but wonder what awaited me at the house that had become a prison of secrets, prophecies, and dragons. I was returning to a world I had tried to escape, but perhaps in facing it, I would find the answers I so desperately sought, and a way to shape my own destiny. The atmosphere in the room was heavy as I packed my belongings under the watchful eyes of Caleb and Tony. I couldn't help but feel uncomfortable, regretting the accumulation of stuff that had become a burden over time. It was a stark reminder of how my life had become entangled with theirs. As I folded clothes and sorted through personal items, I couldn't shake the feeling of being suffocated by their presence. Caleb had insisted on accompanying me, his eyes never leaving my every move. It was as if he didn't trust me for a second to pack on my own. That night, as we settled in for sleep, Caleb dropped a bombshell. "I'll be sleeping in this room, Millie." I turned to him in disbelief. "What? No, Caleb, that's not necessary. I'm perfectly capable of sleeping on my own." He raised an eyebrow, his tone unwavering. "It's for your safety, Millie. We can't take any chances. You did saw those men who tried to hurt you earlier, right? Nothing guarantees they won't come back." I sighed, feeling my annoyance rise. "But I'm not a child, Caleb. I can take care of myself." He didn't budge, and I realized arguing further would be futile. With a resigned nod, I conceded, "Fine, we'll share the room." As we settled into the bed, I couldn't help but feel a sense of discomfort. The idea of sharing a bed with Caleb, despite our shared past, was unsettling. Plus, he was shirtless, and my eyes were begging to stare at his chiseled abs, which I tried my best not to do. We lay there in silence, our bodies inches apart, and it was as if the weight of our history hung heavily in the air. I stared up at the ceiling, struggling to fall asleep. The presence of another person in such close proximity was foreign to me, and I couldn't help but doubt if Caleb and I could ever have a successful relationship. The tangled web of our past and the secrets that surrounded us made me question if there was any room for a future together. As sleep eluded me, I couldn't help but wonder what lay ahead for us. The journey ahead was uncertain, and I had no idea how to navigate the complexities of my relationship with Caleb. But one thing was clear: I couldn't escape my destiny, and it seemed that Caleb was determined to be a part of it, whether I liked it or not. The next morning, I awoke to find myself curled up next to Caleb. Panic surged through me as I quickly pulled away, my face flushed with embarrassment. How had that happened? I couldn't recall ever being so physically close to him before. Caleb, however, seemed entirely unfazed by the situation. He stretched languidly and then rose from the bed, his movements fluid. "Good morning, Millie. Sleep well?" I mumbled something incoherent, still feeling flustered by our unintentional intimacy. I couldn't meet his gaze as I hastily got out of bed and began preparing for the day ahead. We gathered our belongings, with Caleb and Tony carrying my bags. The silence between us was deafening, and I struggled to find words to break it. Caleb, usually so talkative, was reserved, and it only added to the tension in the room. As we made our way to the airport, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The unknown future loomed ahead of us, and I had no control over the path I was being led down. Caleb left me and Tony alone for a brief moment, which only heightened my anxiety. What were his intentions? When he returned, Caleb led us to a private plane waiting on the tarmac. The sight of it was unexpected, and I turned to him in confusion. "Why are we taking a private plane?" He smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "It's the safest way for us to travel, Millie. Trust me, we have a long journey ahead." I had little choice but to follow him onto the plane, the weight of uncertainty pressing down on me. As we boarded, I couldn't help but wonder what lay ahead on this unexpected journey, and what role I was truly meant to play in Caleb's world, Caleb's POV. I descended the basement stairs, my steps purposeful, my expression stern. Millie's escape had been a breach of trust, and I couldn't let it go without consequence. She needed to understand the gravity of her actions. As I entered the dimly lit basement, I saw Millie standing there, her expression a mixture of defiance and resignation. Her eyes met mine, and for a moment I saw a flicker of fear before she quickly masked it with determination. "Millie," I began, my voice firm, "what you did was reckless and dangerous. Running away like that put both of us in danger. You need to learn that your actions have consequences." With that, I turned the key in the heavy door, locking it securely behind me. She was left with only a cot and a wool blanket, her surroundings stark and unforgiving. I knew it was a harsh punishment, but it was necessary to make her realize the severity of her actions. As I made my way back upstairs, I couldn't help but reflect on our relationship. The differences between her and my previous lover, also named Millie, were stark. This Millie had a boundless joy for life and an insatiable curiosity about the world around her. She reacted to new experiences with an enthusiasm that I found both endearing and frustrating. I couldn't deny that I had grown fond of her, despite my initial reluctance to accept her as the keeper of the Dragonstone and my reservations about our forced mating bond. She was a puzzle I was eager to unravel, a mystery that had the potential to change everything I knew about myself and my kind. But there was no denying the challenges ahead. Millie was headstrong, independent, and determined to maintain her freedom. It was a clash of wills that I couldn't afford to lose, not if I wanted to protect her and the Dragonstone. Tony's voice was a persistent echo in my mind, his words a nagging reminder of the choices I had made. We were in my study, a room that had witnessed countless discussions, but this one was different. It was about Millie. "Caleb, you can't keep her locked in the basement like that," Tony implored, his concern etched across his face. "She's terrified of the dark, and you know it. Remember what happened in China? She panicked during that power outage." I leaned back in my chair, my jaw set in stubborn determination. "She needs to learn her lesson, Tony. Running away was reckless, and I can't simply let it slide. We have a duty to protect her and the Dragonstone." Tony's frustration was palpable as he ran a hand through his hair. "I understand your point, but this is too harsh. We can find other ways to make her understand without resorting to this." I couldn't deny the logic in Tony's words, but my resolve remained unshaken. Millie needed to grasp the gravity of her actions, to understand that there were consequences for her choices. It was for her own safety, as well as the safety of our kind. "Tony, I appreciate your concern," I said, my tone unyielding, "but I can't afford to be lenient. There's too much at stake, and I won't let her put herself or the Dragonstone in danger." With a heavy sigh, Tony rose from his chair, clearly frustrated by my stubbornness. "I hope you know what you're doing, Caleb, but remember, she's not just the keeper of the Dragonstone. She's a person with her own fears and vulnerabilities." As Tony left the room, I was left alone with my thoughts, torn between my duty and my growing concern for Millie. It was a precarious balance, and I couldn't help but wonder if there was a better way to handle this delicate situation. The dim glow of the moon seeped through the curtains, casting faint silhouettes in the room. Restlessness had kept me tossing and turning in my bed, unable to find solace in the embrace of sleep. It was then that a disquieting intuition crept into my mind, a premonition that something was amiss. My senses heightened as I listened to the night's symphony, the soft rustling of leaves outside, the distant hoot of an owl, and the ever-present hum of the world beyond. Yet, it was the absence of one sound that alarmed me the most, the faint, rhythmic beat of a heart. With a racing heart of my own, I leaped out of bed and made my way to the basement, my steps swift and purposeful. The stairs seemed to stretch endlessly, each one leading me closer to the source of my apprehension. When I reached the bottom, the sight before me froze the very breath in my lungs. Millie lay there, unconscious, her fragile form sprawled on the cold, unforgiving floor. Panic surged through me, but I couldn't afford to lose my composure. I rushed to her side, my trembling hands gently cradling her as I scooped her into my arms. Her skin was pale, her breathing shallow and labored. Desperation fueled my actions as I carried her to her room, gently placing her on the bed. I watched her intently, the seconds ticking away like an eternity. My heart sank as her heart rate continued to slow, the life force within her slipping away. Without hesitation, I leaned down, my lips meeting hers in a fervent kiss. It was an act of desperation, an attempt to breathe life back into her. As our lips touched, a spark of energy surged between us, a connection that transcended the physical. I could feel the warmth returning to her heart responding to the urgency of the moment. It was as though our souls had briefly intertwined, and in that moment, I knew that I couldn't bear to lose her. I had become inexplicably entangled in her fate. I spent the remainder of the night by her side, my hand gently resting on her chest, feeling the steady, reassuring rhythm of her heartbeat. It was in those quiet hours that I grappled with the complex emotions that Millie had awakened within me. She bore the face of my lost love, a haunting reminder of a past I could never forget. But she was also undeniably herself, vibrant, spirited, and full of life. It was a contradiction that left me both tormented and entranced. The morning sun painted the room with a warm, golden hue as I stood in the kitchen, diligently preparing breakfast. The scent of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, mingling with the aroma of sizzling bacon and scrambled eggs. It was a routine I had followed countless times, but today it held a significance that weighed heavily on my conscience. As I placed a plate of food on the dining table, I heard the faint sound of hesitant footsteps descending the staircase. Turning my gaze toward the source of the sound, I found Millie slowly making her way down, her eyes cast downward as if she were bracing herself for something dreadful. Her apprehension was palpable, and it tugged at my heartstrings. It was a stark reminder of the pain I had caused her, and a weighty guilt settled in the pit of my stomach. Millie's voice trembled as she spoke, her words carrying the weight of her anxiety. Are you going to lock me in the basement again?" She looked up at me, her eyes filled with trepidation. I couldn't blame her for her fear, given my previous actions. I had made a grave mistake, one that I needed to rectify. I took a step toward her, my expression softening as I realized the depths of her vulnerability. "No, Millie," I said gently, my voice filled with remorse. "I won't lock you in the basement again. I promise." I meant every word of that promise, determined to mend the trust I had broken. Slowly, Millie's tense posture seemed to ease, and she took a hesitant step closer to the table. Her gaze lingered on the plate of food before her, and she glanced up at me with a mixture of relief and gratitude. I pulled out a chair for her, gesturing for her to sit. "Please, have a seat. Breakfast is ready." My words were laced with a sincerity that I hoped would convey my remorse. Millie hesitated for a moment before she took a seat. Her movements were cautious, as if she still expected some form of retribution. I watched her closely, my guilt intensifying with each passing moment. As she began to eat, I couldn't help but observe her closely. The fragility of her demeanor struck a chord within me, and it dawned on me just how much harm I had caused with my previous actions. I had underestimated her resilience, and I had been too harsh. Silence settled over the table as we both ate, the weight of our unspoken words hanging in the air. My desire to make amends battled with my pride, and it was clear that I needed to find a way to rebuild the trust that had been shattered. In that moment, as I watched Millie slowly savor her breakfast, I resolved to do better. I had been given a second chance, a chance to treat her with the kindness and understanding she deserved. It was a chance I couldn't afford to squander, and I would do everything in my power to make amends for my mistakes. The tension between Caleb and me still hung in the air like an unspoken truth. After the incident in the basement, things had changed, and I was left feeling awkward and unsure of how to navigate our newfound circumstances. It was as if we were two strangers trying to coexist under the same roof, and I desperately sought a way to bridge the gap. One morning, as I wandered aimlessly through the luxurious house, I decided that I needed something to occupy my time and mind. The silence that surrounded me was suffocating, and I yearned for some semblance of normalcy. Approaching Caleb, who was seated in the living room, I hesitated before finally speaking. "Caleb, I'd like to help out around the house. Keep myself busy, you know." Caleb regarded me for a moment, his eyes betraying a hint of surprise at my offer. It was a small step, a way to contribute to this strange arrangement we had found ourselves in. After a moment of contemplation, Caleb nodded. "That's a good idea, Millie. There are some groceries we need. I'll arrange for them to be delivered, and you can take care of the rest." His willingness to accept my help was a relief, and I couldn't help but feel a small sense of accomplishment. It was a subtle shift, but it marked the beginning of a fragile understanding between us. As Caleb made arrangements for the groceries, I set about my newfound tasks with determination. It was a way to keep myself occupied, to fill the empty hours that stretched ahead. Though the house was already immaculate, I busied myself with cleaning and organizing, finding solace in the simplicity of the chores. As the groceries arrived, I couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. It was a small victory, a step toward normalcy in a life that had taken a bewildering turn. And as I continued to tend to the housework, I couldn't help but hope that with time, the awkwardness between Caleb and me would gradually fade, replaced by something more familiar and comfortable. As I went about my tasks in the opulent mansion, a new presence entered the house, one that stirred a strange sense of déjà vu within me. It was Ian, a man whose face felt oddly familiar, though I couldn't quite place where I had encountered him before. His arrival was met with a subtle surprise, both from him and the others in the room. Ian's gaze fell upon me, and there was a flicker of recognition in his eyes, as though he had already known of my presence. I found myself wondering if my existence here was something that had been discussed behind closed doors, hidden from my knowledge. With a polite smile, Ian spoke up, his voice carrying a soothing tone. "Millie, I believe we might be able to help you retrieve your lost memories through hypnosis therapy. It could provide some clarity and answers." The suggestion hung in the air, met with varying degrees of interest from those present. Caleb in particular seemed keen on the idea, his gaze focused on me with a hint of expectation. But despite their enthusiasm, I couldn't shake the unease that gnawed at me. Caleb, ever the attentive host, offered his assurance. "We can make the basement comfortable for you, Millie. It will be a safe space." After a moment of hesitation, I found myself nodding in agreement. It was a chance, however slim, to uncover the mysteries of my past, to make sense of the fragments that lingered just beyond my grasp. Yet deep down, I harbored doubts, wondering if these memories, once unearthed, would truly transform me into the person Caleb seemed to long for. As the decision was made to proceed with the therapy, a heavy sense of uncertainty settled over me. In the midst of this elaborate house, with its secrets and enigmas, I could only hope that this endeavor would lead me closer to understanding who I really was and what role I played in the intricate web of dragon lore that surrounded me. Seeking some form of distraction from my racing thoughts, Ian inquired about the apparent absence of people in the town, a query that seemed to strike a somber chord with Caleb. His voice was tinged with an unsettling gravity as he revealed a chilling truth. "I had to eliminate them." Caleb admitted somberly. "They posed a threat to Millie, attempting to take the stone from her." The revelation sent shivers down my spine, and my unease deepened. The weight of the responsibility that rested upon my shoulders, the power of the dragon's stone, and the lengths to which Caleb was willing to go to protect me left me feeling vulnerable and trapped in this enigmatic world. Caleb, ever the pragmatic one, suggested that Celine help me unpack while he and Tony readied the basement for the impending therapy. With a nod, Celine led me away from the conversation, guiding me toward the tasks at hand. As I began to unpack my belongings, I couldn't help but sense that something was amiss, though I couldn't pinpoint the source of my discomfort. The feeling of being watched, of secrets that loomed just out of reach, weighed heavily on me, leaving me more uncertain than ever about the path that lay ahead. As Ian departed, leaving us to our preparations for the upcoming hypnosis therapy, he promised to return in 2 days. His departure left me with a lingering sense of curiosity about his connection to this place and to me. The anticipation of the upcoming treatment weighed heavily on me as I prepared for the session that promised to unearth my lost memories. It was Ian, the enigmatic figure from my past, who would conduct the procedure, and my unease about him lingered like a shadow. Celine, perceptive as ever, sensed my apprehension and approached me with a reassuring smile. "Don't worry, Millie," she began, her voice warm and soothing. "Ian is trustworthy, and he was quite close to you in your past life. You'll be in good hands." I wanted to believe her, to trust in the words she spoke, but the uncertainty still gnawed at the edges of my consciousness. The pieces of my past, like shards of a broken mirror, were scattered, and I hoped that this therapy would help me assemble them into a coherent picture. With a hesitant nod, I acknowledged Celine's reassurance, grateful for her support in this unfamiliar world where even my own memories remained elusive. As the moments passed and I absorbed Celine's comforting words, a sense of ease gradually settled over me. Celine spoke reassuringly. You know, Millie, Ian is a trustworthy person. He was always there for you in your past life, just like he'll be there for you now. I nodded, a hint of a smile tugging at my lips. It's just, I can't shake this feeling of unease. Maybe it's because I don't remember everything. Celine placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. It's natural to feel that way, but remember, you and Ian had an incredible bond. He cared for you deeply. And well, there were moments of tension too, especially with his twin brother Ian. I furrowed my brow. Ian, what happened between us? Celine sighed, choosing her words carefully. It wasn't always smooth sailing. There were disagreements, misunderstandings, but Ian was always there to mediate and support you. I let out a small sigh, trying to process the information. I see. I guess it's just the unknown that's unsettling. Celine smiled gently. You're not alone in this, Millie. We're here for you, every step of the way. Her words offered some solace, and I began to feel more comfortable with the idea of Ian conducting the treatment. 2 days later, the momentous day of the treatment arrived. The basement had been meticulously transformed into a professional therapist's office, complete with soft lighting and comfortable furnishings. It was a far cry from the cold and unwelcoming place it had been when I was locked away. As I stepped into the basement, the ambience immediately put me at ease. The soft hum of a white noise machine filled the room, and a pleasant aroma from a scented diffuser wafted through the air. Ian, wearing a reassuring smile, was seated in a plush armchair, a notepad and pen in hand. I took a seat on the opposite side of the room, feeling more relaxed than I had expected. The transformation of this space had indeed made it feel comforting and safe. Ian initiated the treatment by gently inquiring, Millie, since you've been with us, have you experienced any moments of familiarity or recognition? I nodded, my thoughts drifting back to my recent travels. Yes, I have. It's strange, but I've felt a sense of familiarity in some of the places I've visited and even in the languages I've spoken, even though I've never learned them in my current life. Ian jotted down my response, his eyes kind and understanding. That's intriguing, Millie. These feelings of familiarity might hold the key to unlocking your past memories. Now, I want you to relax as much as possible and just let your mind wander. I'll guide you through the process. I took a deep breath, trying to let go of any lingering tension. Okay, I'm ready. As Ian began the treatment, I closed my eyes and my mind opened up to the possibility of regaining my lost memories. He delved deeper into the treatment, his soothing voice guiding me through the recesses of my mind. He aimed to lead me to a crucial memory, the memory of my own death. I closed my eyes, willing myself to be receptive to whatever would surface. The room's comforting atmosphere provided some solace, but the weight of anticipation still rested heavily on my shoulders. Ian's voice was gentle as he said, Millie, try to remember the events leading up to your death. Let your memories flow. I concentrated, delving into the depths of my consciousness, hoping to find some glimmer of the past. But as I reached back in time, a sudden sharp pain pierced the back of my head. It was as if a searing dagger of agony had been thrust into my skull. I gasped and clutched my head, tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. The pain was intense, overwhelming, and blinding. It felt like an invisible barrier had been erected, preventing me from accessing that particular memory. Ian's voice was filled with concern as he said, Millie, are you all right? We can stop if it's too much. I blinked back tears, my voice strained. No, I have to know. I have to remember. The searing pain in the back of my head gradually subsided, allowing Ian to continue the hypnosis session. He must have sensed my determination to uncover the past, for he proceeded cautiously, guiding me with utmost care. Let's try a different approach, Millie, Ian said soothingly. I want you to focus on the small tabletop waterfall in this room. Imagine the water flowing gently, its sound calming your mind. I followed his instructions, allowing the soothing sound of the water to wash over me. My tense muscles began to relax, and I felt a sense of tranquility enveloping me. Now, Ian continued, I want you to visualize a scene from your past life, a moment with Caleb. Can you see it? As I concentrated on his words, my surroundings transformed. The basement faded away, and in its place, I found myself standing before a stone house. The image was vivid and lifelike, as if I had stepped into a long-forgotten memory. Before me stood Caleb, his familiar, enigmatic presence commanding my attention. My heart quickened as I gazed upon him, and the sense of déjà vu washed over me once more. It was as though I had been transported to a distant time, a place where my past life had unfolded. I stood there, a silent observer in the vivid tableau of the past. Before me, Caleb appeared as he did in ages long past, adorned in clothing that spoke of a different era. The realization washed over me. This was a scene from my past life. As my gaze shifted, I saw her, a woman who bore an uncanny resemblance to me. But there was a profound difference. Her essence carried a weight of sadness, an air of longing that transcended the ages. It was unmistakable. She was my past self. The sight sent a shiver down my spine. I watched, transfixed, as my past self and Caleb exchanged words. Their voices were like a distant echo, their conversation a dance of emotions, veiled in layers of time. It was a moment of connection, of shared history that stretched far beyond my current understanding. Questions swirled in my mind, each one begging to be answered. Who was this woman from my past life, and what had transpired between her and Caleb? The enigma of my existence deepened, and I yearned to unravel the threads of time that bound us together. I stood there, still a silent observer in the echo of time, as Caleb approached the past version of myself with a tenderness that took me by surprise. He looked at her with eyes filled with understanding and a depth of emotion that transcended the ages. It was our first meeting in this past life, and I could sense the profound connection that existed between them. Caleb spoke to the past Millie, his voice laced with a gentle comfort. "I can see the pain in your eyes. You don't have to carry it alone." Her eyes, mirroring my own, glistened with unshed tears as she revealed her torment. "I'm infertile, Caleb. A brutal attack left me barren." His response was immediate and heartfelt. "I don't need an heir, Millie. I don't need anything more than you." The weight of his words hung in the air, filling the space with a poignant understanding. In that moment, I realized the depth of their connection, forged not only through love, but also through shared pain and a willingness to embrace each other's flaws and imperfections. As the scene unfolded before me, I couldn't help but be moved by the unconditional love they shared, even in the face of adversity. It was a love that transcended the boundaries of time and left an indelible mark on my soul, bridging the gap between my past and present selves. In the blink of an eye, the scene shifted, and I found myself transported to another vision, one filled with chaos and violence. The world around me was consumed by the horrors of battle, the air thick with the acrid scent of smoke and the haunting sounds of clashing swords and the screams of the wounded. Yet amidst the carnage, my past self and Caleb stood together, sharing a moment of laughter that defied the grim reality surrounding them. My past self wore armor that glistened in the dim light, and Caleb, standing beside her, looked every bit the valiant warrior. Their laughter, though incongruous in the midst of such devastation, was genuine and filled with a deep connection that transcended the chaos of war. It was a fleeting but profound glimpse into a time when they had fought side by side, their bond unbreakable, even in the face of danger. As I watched this vision unfold, I couldn't help but feel a sense of awe at the resilience of their love, which had endured through countless trials and tribulations. The visions continued to unfold before me, each one revealing a different facet of my past life with Caleb. In the next scene, I found myself in a beautifully adorned Victorian-style house. The ambiance was one of elegance and opulence, with ornate furniture and rich tapestries adorning the walls. As I gazed around the room, Caleb entered, carrying my past self in his arms with a tenderness that was both touching and heartfelt. Their love was palpable, and the way he looked at her was filled with adoration and devotion. It was a scene of profound intimacy, one that spoke volumes about the depth of their connection. As they shared this tender moment, I couldn't help but feel a softening of my own emotions towards Caleb. Despite the tumultuous journey we had been on since my arrival in this world, witnessing these glimpses of our past together reminded me of the love that had once bound us. It was a love that transcended time and adversity, and it began to thaw the icy barrier of anger that had built up within me. I slowly began to regain consciousness, my head feeling heavy and my thoughts still swirling in a haze of memories and emotions. As my senses gradually returned, I realized I was lying down, and the soft murmurs of voices reached my ears. I blinked my eyes open, my vision slowly coming into focus. Ian, the therapist who had guided me through those intense visions of my past life with Caleb, was sitting nearby, his expression filled with concern. His words were soothing as he spoke to me, reassuring me that the discomfort I was feeling was a normal part of the hypnosis process and that it would subside with time. I groaned softly, my head throbbing with a dull ache, but I managed a weak nod of acknowledgement. It was as if I had just journeyed through time and emotions, and my physical body was struggling to catch up with the experiences my mind had gone through. Ian continued to offer words of comfort and support, and I began to take in my surroundings, a room that felt strangely both familiar and foreign. My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions, but I couldn't deny that the hypnosis had brought me closer to understanding my past life and the complex relationship I had shared with Caleb.